A plain manila envelope arrived in the mail with no return address. Inside was a secret that could rewrite history. This is the story of the Majestic 12 documents, a collection of papers that claim to prove a secret group of scientists and military leaders was formed to manage the UFO phenomenon and the recovery of alien bodies from Roswell. By the end of this journey, you will have all the evidence to decide for yourself if this is the ultimate proof of a cover-up or the most sophisticated hoax ever created. We will investigate the mysterious origins of these papers and the forensic analysis that revealed shocking inconsistencies. What does it mean when a single piece of mail can fuel a worldwide mystery for decades? The package arrived in the spring of 1984, a simple manila envelope with no name to identify its sender. It was addressed to Jaime Shandera, a television producer deeply invested in researching unidentified flying objects. The postmark, a small but crucial detail, placed its origin in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Inside was no ordinary letter, but a roll of 35mm film. When Shandera developed the film, he was staring at what appeared to be a classified 8-page briefing document. It was addressed to President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower, dated November 18, 1952. The subject was the recovery of a craft and its non-human occupants near Roswell 5 years prior. And it named the 12 members of a secret scientific and military panel, a group designated Majestic 12, formed to manage this earth-shattering secret. In an instant, a single unmarked envelope had delivered a story that could shatter our understanding of history. The document Shandera now held felt like a key to a hidden room in American history. Its language was dry and bureaucratic, a stark contrast to the incredible story it told. Dated November 18, 1952, it was presented as a top-secret briefing for President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower, preparing him for a reality the public could never know. It began with a foundational event, an executive order. According to the text, on September 24, 1947, President Harry S. Truman authorized the creation of a special operations unit. This was not a standard government committee. It was a panel of 12 men, handpicked for their brilliance, their influence, and their absolute discretion. They were given a name that sounded like something from a classified project, Majestic 12. The list of members was a who is who of the American establishment. It included figures like Vannevar Bush, the revered scientist who helped orchestrate the Manhattan Project, and General Nathan Twining, the head of the Air Force who had shown intense interest in flying saucer reports. There was Dr. Detlev Bronk, a pioneering biophysicist, and Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, the first director of the Central Intelligence Agency. These were not fringe characters. They were the architects of the modern world, the very men you would choose to manage an unimaginable secret. The document gave them a single, staggering mission: to analyze and exploit the materials and entities recovered from a crash near Roswell, New Mexico, in the summer of 1947. It described the recovery of a flying disc, a craft of unknown origin, and the bodies of its non-human operators. The tone was cold and clinical, discussing the wreckage and the biological entities as if they were new types of aircraft and foreign pilots. This formal, matter-of-fact language is what made the document so compelling and so deeply unsettling. It did not read like a fantastical story. It read like a government memorandum, precisely the kind of document that would be generated to bury a truth too explosive for the world to handle. The implications were profound. If this single sheet of film was real, then everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe was a carefully constructed lie. So who were these 12 men tasked with managing the universe's biggest secret? The list reads like a shadow government of American science and military might. At the top was Dr. Vannevar Bush, the alleged chairman. In reality, he was one of the most powerful scientists alive, the head of the Office of Scientific Research and Development during the Second World War and a key architect of the Manhattan Project. He was the man who knew how to turn theoretical science into world-changing reality. Then there was General Nathan Twining, the head of the Air Materiel Command. He was the same general who, in a very real and declassified memo from 1947, had expressed serious interest in the flying disc phenomenon, making his presence on this panel feel chillingly logical. The list included the first director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Rear Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter. His inclusion was a masterstroke, directly linking the alleged cover-up to the nascent intelligence community. Another key member was Dr. Detlev Bronk, a renowned physiologist and biophysicist. His expertise in how living bodies function and potentially how alien bodies might differ made him a terrifyingly perfect fit. Other names carried similar weight. There was Dr. Jerome Hunsaker, a pioneer in aeronautical design who could analyze a strange aircraft. General Hoyt Vandenberg was a former Air Force Chief of Staff, a man with the authority to bury any project deep within the military bureaucracy. Gordon Gray was a special assistant on national security for President Truman, a man who lived in the corridors of power. Each man was a titan in his field, a figure of unimpeachable reputation and formidable skill. Why does this matter so much? A forger inventing a secret group might populate it with obscure officials or fictional characters. But the Majestic 12 list is filled with people whose real-world power and expertise align perfectly with the document's incredible claims. These were precisely the individuals you would need to reverse engineer an unknown craft and understand its non-human pilots. Their collective credibility is what gives the documents their enduring power. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Is this a brilliant hoax that cleverly used the names of famous men? Or is it a genuine roster of the keepers of a cosmic truth? But how does this shadowy committee connect to the world's most famous UFO crash? The Majestic 12 documents are anchored by a single, explosive event, the incident near Roswell, New Mexico in the summer of 1947. The briefing for Eisenhower explicitly states the group was formed as a direct consequence of that crash, tasked with one of the most monumental missions imaginable, the recovery and analysis of the wreckage and its occupants. The language used to describe this event is meticulously clinical, stripping away any sense of wonder or fear. The object is not called a spaceship, it is a flying disc. The beings are not referred to as aliens, but as extraterrestrial biological entities. This cold, technical terminology is precisely what you would expect in a top-secret government document designed to discuss the unbelievable in a believable, bureaucratic way. Now compare this to the very first official statement from the Roswell Army Airfield. On July 8, 1947, the Public Information Officer issued a press release that sent shockwaves around the globe. He announced that the Army had recovered a flying disc. The wording is an exact match. This creates a haunting echo across the decades. The official story quickly changed, of course. The flying disc became a mundane weather balloon, but the Majestic documents insist the initial press release was the truth, a fleeting moment where the secret slipped out before being brutally suppressed. The documents claim that in the wake of this, Majestic 12 was created to take control, to analyze the technology far from public view, and to understand the biology of the entities found at the site. This direct link to Roswell is the very heart of the mystery. It takes a well-known public event and injects it with a hidden, profound meaning, suggesting that for one brief moment, the truth was actually announced to the world, only to be snatched back and buried by 12 of the most powerful men on the planet. Yet the Majestic 12 briefing was not the only document to emerge from the shadows. A second piece of evidence soon surfaced, a memo so brief and direct it seemed to cut through the complexity with a single, powerful stroke. This was the Truman-Forrestal memo, dated September 24, 1947. It was a simple one-page letter on White House stationery addressed from President Harry S. Truman to his Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal. Its message was stunningly clear. It stated that the President had approved the recommendations for the operations of Majestic 12, granting it full authority to proceed. The language was exactly what you would expect from a commander-in-chief, decisive and to the point. This was not a lengthy analysis, it was an executive order. For researchers, this memo was the smoking gun. If the Eisenhower briefing laid out the grand conspiracy, this single page was its birth certificate, a presidential seal of approval that seemed to transform a wild theory into a documented historical fact. It provided a direct line from the highest office in the land to the secret panel, suggesting the cover-up was not a rogue military operation but a sanctioned national policy. The date was also critical, placing the group's formation just months after the Roswell incident, a timeline that felt perfectly logical for a government scrambling to contain an unprecedented event. But the story of James Forrestal himself adds a deeply human and tragic layer to the mystery. Forrestal was a deeply respected man, the first Secretary of Defense, a pillar of the establishment. Yet in 1949, he suffered a severe mental breakdown. He was hospitalized and, in a shocking turn of events, died after falling from a window on the 16th floor of the National Naval Medical Center. The official ruling was suicide, but for those who believe in the Majestic 12 narrative, his death is seen as deeply suspicious. Conspiracy theorists argue that Forrestal, burdened by the cosmic secret he helped to keep, was either driven to madness by the weight of it or was silenced because he posed a risk of revealing the truth. His tragic end is often pointed to as the ultimate cost of knowing too much, a dark footnote that suggests the secrets of Majestic 12 were not just world-changing but soul-crushing. This memo and the grim fate of one of its key figures force a haunting question. Did this single page of presidential authorization not only create a secret committee, but also set in motion a chain of events that would destroy a man? Another piece of the puzzle surfaced from the most unlikely of places, the official record itself. In the 1980s, while digging through old files at the National Archives, the nuclear physicist and renowned UFO investigator Stanton Friedman made a stunning discovery. It was a memo dated July 14, 1954, and it was written on the official stationery of President Eisenhower's National Security Council. The author was Robert Cutler, the special assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, and it was addressed to General Nathan Twining, one of the named members of Majestic 12. The subject line was brief and explosive. It concerned a scheduled meeting of the MJ-12 group. This was not a leaked film or a mysterious package. This was a carbon copy memo found in the official files of the United States government, and it seemed to name the secret panel in black and white. For believers, this was the ultimate validation, a piece of the conspiracy hiding in plain sight within the nation's own attic. The initial excitement was electric. How could a hoax exist inside the National Archives? This memo appeared to be the undeniable link, the bureaucratic paperwork that proved Majestic 12 was a real, functioning committee. It was a mundane scheduling note that seemed to confirm an extraordinary truth. But as with everything in this mystery, the initial clarity soon clouded. Skeptics and government archivists began to pick the document apart. They pointed to strange anomalies like the way the subject line was typed slightly off-center, and the fact that no other copies of this memo were ever found in any other government files related to Robert Cutler or General Twining. The most prominent theory from skeptics was that the memo was a simple administrative error, a misfiled piece of paper referring to a completely different mundane meeting, perhaps one concerning a project with a similar but unrelated codename. The other, more sinister theory was that the document was a plant deliberately inserted into the archives by someone who wanted to lend credibility to the Majestic 12 story. If that were true, it meant the hoax was sophisticated enough to infiltrate the very institutions we trust to protect our history. So which is it? Is the Cutler-Twining memo the single most compelling piece of official evidence, or is it the cleverest piece of a brilliantly constructed deception placed right under our noses? The answer depends entirely on who you ask, and it forces us to confront a deeply unsettling possibility. If a document in the National Archives cannot be trusted, then what can? The documents presented a puzzle that could not be solved by belief alone. It demanded evidence, the kind that could be weighed and measured. This is where the investigation turned from a historical mystery into a forensic science project. Leading UFO researchers, including Stanton Friedman and William Moore, initiated a meticulous analysis of the physical papers. They started with the most basic elements, the paper itself. The memos were on bond paper, a common type for the era, but the exact weight and watermark needed to match what the White House and Pentagon actually used in the 1950s. Then came the typeface. The documents appeared to have been typed on an IBM Selectric typewriter, a machine celebrated for its interchangeable typing balls that could produce different fonts. This detail, however, became one of the first major red flags. The specific font found on the Majestic 12 papers, called Courier 12, was not available until the 1960s. It was an anachronism, a modern font on a document supposedly from a decade earlier. Imagine finding a smartphone in a photograph from the 1970s. The inconsistency was that stark. The formatting also raised serious questions. Government documents from the 1940s and 50s followed strict stylistic protocols with specific margins, paragraph indentations, and heading structures. The Majestic 12 briefing, however, displayed formatting quirks that did not perfectly align with the official standards of its claimed time period. It was close, but to a trained eye, it was not quite right. Even the language itself was scrutinized. Analysts compared the vocabulary and phrasing to authentic memos from the era. They noted terms and bureaucratic jargon that felt slightly off, as if someone from the 1980s was trying a little too hard to sound like a 1950s government official. These were not conclusive proofs of a hoax on their own, but they were cracks in the foundation. Each anomaly was a small whisper of doubt, suggesting that the story these papers told might have been written not in the tense aftermath of Roswell, but in the calm of a much later time, by a hand that was not as familiar with the past as it pretended to be. Forensic analysis could only take the investigation so far. The next logical step was to confront the source of the secrecy head-on. What did the United States government itself have to say about these earth-shattering papers? The official response was swift, unified, and absolute denial. The Federal Bureau of Investigation launched its own review. Their conclusion was blunt. The documents were fabrications, a clever but undeniable hoax. The Air Force, the very institution named in the papers, went even further. In the 1990s, they released a massive report specifically addressing the Roswell incident. This report, titled Case Closed, made a startling claim. The mysterious wreckage recovered in 1947 was not a weather balloon, nor was it a flying disc. It was, they asserted, from a top-secret project called Mogul. This involved long, train-like arrays of high-altitude balloons carrying sophisticated microphones designed to listen for Soviet atomic tests. The report argued that the strange, rubbery materials and unconventional structure of a Mogul balloon train perfectly explained the bizarre debris field described by the Roswell witnesses. As for the alien bodies, the Air Force claimed they were likely anthropomorphic test dummies used in high-altitude parachute drops during the 1950s, whose memories had become conflated and misstated by witnesses over time. From the official perspective, the case was indeed closed. There was no alien craft, no non-human bodies, and therefore no need for a secret panel like Majestic 12. The documents were simply a fantasy built upon a series of misunderstandings. But for those who had already peered into the depths of the mystery, this blanket denial did not feel like a resolution. It felt like a script. This is where the argument flips entirely on its head. What if the government's strenuous denial is not the end of the story, but a crucial part of it? Many researchers argue that this is the very heart of modern disinformation. The strategy is not just to hide the truth, but to bury it under a mountain of conflicting, confusing, and often ridiculous explanations. You release an official report that attributes alien bodies to crash test dummies, an explanation that many find laughably insufficient. You label genuine documents as fakes right alongside the actual forgeries. The goal is to create so much noise and contradiction that the average person throws their hands up in frustration and simply stops looking. It makes the entire topic seem like the territory of cranks and conspiracy theorists, effectively shielding any real secrets behind a wall of absurdity. So we are left with two entirely opposite realities. In one, the government is telling the plain truth, and the Majestic 12 papers are an elaborate lie. In the other, the government's denial is the lie, a carefully crafted performance designed to make you doubt the evidence right in front of you. This is the ultimate deadlock, a hall of mirrors where every piece of evidence can be framed as either a revelation or a deception. How do you find solid ground when the very act of being told something is false can be interpreted as proof that it is true? The most intimate part of any document is the signature, a unique mark of personal identity and official approval. When investigators turned their magnifying glasses to the handwriting on the Majestic 12 papers, they entered a realm of tiny details that could make or break the entire case. The signature of President Harry S. Truman on the crucial memo authorizing the group became the epicenter of this forensic storm. Professional document examiners and historians gathered known authentic samples of Truman's signature from letters, official orders, and memos throughout his presidency. They placed these alongside the signature on the Majestic memo, searching for the unconscious, automatic patterns that every person's hand reveals. The differences, while subtle to an untrained eye, were telling. Experts noted inconsistencies in the pen pressure. Truman's real signature typically showed a confident, consistent flow, with a distinctive rhythm to the loops in the H and the T. The signature on the Majestic document, however, appeared slightly more deliberate, as if the hand was moving with conscious control rather than unconscious habit. The formation of specific letters was also called into question. The slant of the letters and the specific way the R in Harry connected to the following letters did not match the fluidity found in his verified signatures from the same period. It was the difference between a natural, walking gait and a careful, studied stroll. These were not glaring, cartoonish forgeries. They were sophisticated imitations, good enough to pass a casual glance but flawed under the intense scrutiny of a microscope. Why would a forger go to such lengths to get the paper and typeface right, only to stumble on the signature? One theory suggests that forging a signature is uniquely difficult because it is not about drawing a shape, but about replicating a motion, a lived-in physical habit that is nearly impossible to copy perfectly. Another possibility is that the forger worked from a single reference sample, inadvertently copying its unique quirks without understanding the natural variation present in a person's genuine signature across hundreds of documents. So we are left with a haunting question. Do these tiny discrepancies in ink and flow expose the entire Majestic 12 project as an elaborate fake, crafted by a human hand that could not perfectly capture the president's own? Or are we simply seeing the natural variation that occurs when a busy man signs his name thousands of times, under different circumstances and with different pens? The answer, you believe, depends on whether you see these flaws as the fatal cracks in a deception, or as the inevitable human imperfections found in any authentic historical record. The most damning evidence against the documents did not come from handwriting analysis or witness testimony, but from the very ink and type that formed their words. A single, undeniable anachronism lies at the heart of the Majestic 12 papers, a technological mismatch as glaring as a digital clock in a Victorian photograph. The font used in the briefing document is a proportional spacing typeface. In a proportional font, a skinny letter like a lowercase I takes up less horizontal space than a wide letter like a capital W. This creates a clean, modern, and easy-to-read text, the kind we are all used to seeing in books and on our screens today. But this convenience was a technological fantasy in the world of 1952. Every single typewriter in every government office in the early 1950s used a monospaced font. Think of the classic look of a telegram or an old novel manuscript. In a monospaced font, every single character, whether it is an I, a W, or a punctuation mark, is allotted the exact same amount of space on the page. This is why old documents have that distinctive, slightly blocky and uneven appearance, with noticeable gaps between narrow letters. The specific machine capable of producing the proportional font seen on the Majestic papers was the IBM Selectric typewriter, a revolutionary device that used a spinning golf ball-like element instead of individual type bars. This machine was not introduced to the public until 1961, a full 9 years after the Eisenhower briefing was supposedly written. This is not a minor detail or a matter of stylistic preference. It is a fundamental chronological impossibility. The document claims to be from an era where every typewriter was, by its very mechanical nature, monospaced. The Majestic 12 papers, however, were typed with the technology of a different decade. This creates an inescapable conclusion. The person who physically created these papers did so sometime after 1961, using a machine that simply did not exist in the government offices of November 18, 1952. So we must ask ourselves a difficult question. How could a genuine, top-secret government document be typed on a typewriter that would not be invented for another 9 years? The typographical trap had been sprung, and the document's credibility was left with a hole from which it could never fully recover. The words on the page themselves began to whisper of a different time. When forensic linguists and historians placed the Majestic 12 papers side by side with verified government documents from the 1940s and 50s, a new set of subtle but powerful inconsistencies emerged. The language of bureaucracy has its own rhythm and vocabulary, a secret code that changes from one decade to the next, and the MJ-12 documents seem to be speaking with a slight but detectable accent. For instance, the very name Majestic 12, often shortened to MJ-12, is a red flag. In the world of genuine top-secret projects from that era, code names were rarely so straightforward or melodramatic. They were often longer, more obscure, and deliberately bland. Think of projects like Sigma 7 or Christic Burner, names designed to reveal nothing, to blend into a sea of administrative noise. The use of MJ-12 as a convenient shorthand feels more like a modern branding choice than a genuine classification from the height of the Cold War. The phrasing within the documents also betrays a modern sensibility. Descriptions of the extraterrestrial biological entities, while clinical, carry a certain dramatic weight that feels crafted for a later audience. Compare this to a real memo from that period discussing, for example, a new type of aircraft or a sensitive intelligence matter. The language is denser, more convoluted, filled with passive voice and arcane bureaucratic jargon that is often difficult for a modern reader to parse. The MJ-12 papers, by contrast, are almost too clean, too easy to understand. They read like someone's idea of how a top-secret document should sound, an interpretation filtered through decades of spy novels and conspiracy theories. One of the most telling details is the use of the term need-to-know basis. This phrase is ubiquitous today, but its prevalence in official government memos from the early 1950s is questionable. It has the ring of a later cliché, a piece of terminology that became popularized long after the date on these papers. Authentic documents from the era often use more specific, less catchy language to describe compartmentalization of information. These linguistic anachronisms are the grammatical equivalent of the typewriter font. They are not glaring errors, but rather subtle cues that the author was not intimately steeped in the daily language of a 1950s Pentagon office. The documents tell an incredible story, but the voice telling it seems to be coming from another room and from another time. But behind every controversial document are the people who bring it to light. The story of Majestic 12 is inseparable from a small, intense group of UFO researchers, each with their own motives and methods. The first recipient, Jaime Shandera, was a television producer and researcher, a man positioned to understand the power of a compelling story. It was his mailbox that received the fateful film. His close colleague was William Moore, an author who had already written extensively on the Roswell incident. Moore was a controversial figure, known for his deep connections within the military intelligence world and for a sometimes aggressive pursuit of the truth. Then there was the most credentialed advocate, Stanton Friedman. He was a nuclear physicist who had worked on classified programs for companies like General Electric. His scientific background and relentless, lecture-driven crusade gave the documents a layer of academic credibility they might otherwise have lacked. These three men formed the initial core of the investigation, but their partnership was far from simple. The world of ufology has always been a fractured landscape of competing theories and personal rivalries. Some researchers accused Moore of being a government agent himself, a conduit for a sophisticated disinformation campaign designed to mislead the entire community. The theory was that the intelligence agencies, wanting to bury the real truth, would feed tantalizing but ultimately fake documents to a trusted insider, who would then spread them far and wide, discrediting the entire field when they were eventually proven false. Others believed the men were sincere, that they were simply the chosen instruments for a courageous whistleblower trying to expose the truth from the inside. Their motivations were as murky as the documents they studied. Was it a quest for truth, a desire for fame, or were they unwitting pawns in a much larger game? The internal conflicts and suspicions that swirled around these key figures created a fog of doubt, making it nearly impossible to separate the message from the messengers. Were they heroic investigators uncovering the century's biggest secret, or were they, perhaps without even knowing it, the central characters in an elaborate act of deception? Into this shadowy world of researchers and leaked documents steps a man who seemed to be the ultimate insider. Richard Doty was not a civilian investigator. He was a special agent with the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigations, an elite counterintelligence unit. His very job was to protect secrets, not to reveal them. And yet, throughout the 1980s, Doty positioned himself as a confidential source for several prominent UFO researchers. He offered tantalizing hints and, on at least one confirmed occasion, provided forged government documents to a man named Paul Bennewitz, a physicist who believed he was monitoring alien communications from a base near Albuquerque. Doty's campaign against Bennewitz was a textbook case of psychological warfare. He fed Bennewitz a convoluted story about a war between hostile and benevolent alien races, complete with fake photos and official-looking papers. The result was devastating. Bennewitz, overwhelmed by the fabricated reality, suffered a mental breakdown and was eventually institutionalized. This confirmed act of government disinformation against a private citizen sent a chilling message to the entire UFO research community. If the Air Force was willing to destroy one man to protect a secret, what else were they capable of? This brings us directly to the Majestic 12 papers. Many investigators see Doty's fingerprints all over them. The theory is stark and compelling. The same counterintelligence apparatus that targeted Paul Bennewitz, using Richard Doty as its point man, later engineered the release of the MJ-12 documents. Their goal was not to reveal the truth, but to bury it. By leaking a set of papers that were compelling yet ultimately flawed, they could accomplish several things at once. They could redirect the energy of the entire UFO research field, sending them chasing a brilliantly crafted red herring. Then, when the documents were eventually exposed as fakes, the entire subject of government UFO cover-ups would be discredited by association. It was the perfect sting operation, a long-term strategy to make the truth seem ridiculous. The package sent to Jaime Shandera, postmarked from Albuquerque, the very city where Richard Doty was stationed, suddenly feels less like a whistleblower's brave act and more like a calculated intelligence drop. So we are left with a deeply unsettling possibility. What if the Majestic 12 documents are not a leaked secret but a weapon? A sophisticated tool of information control, designed not to inform but to mislead, to confuse, and ultimately, to make us stop asking the very questions that someone somewhere does not want answered. The story of Paul Bennewitz reveals the terrifying power of a disinformation campaign. He was a successful physicist and the owner of a high-tech electronics company, a man trained to trust data and observation. From his property in New Mexico, he began monitoring strange signals and pulsing lights emanating from the Manzano Mountains, a secure military storage area. Convinced he was witnessing alien activity, he meticulously documented everything, eventually sharing his findings with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. This is when he met Special Agent Richard Doty. Instead of dismissing Bennewitz, Doty and his colleagues at FOSI began to feed him an elaborate fictional narrative. They provided him with forged documents and briefings that confirmed his worst fears. The story they crafted described a secret underground base, a collaboration between the government and a race of benevolent aliens, and a terrifying conflict with a hostile species known as the Greys. They told Bennewitz he was a crucial player in an interstellar war, a patriot helping to save humanity. The effect was catastrophic. Bennewitz, immersed in this manufactured reality, devoted all his time and resources to the fictional conflict. The psychological strain was immense, leading to his eventual mental collapse and hospitalization. This was not an investigation. It was a deliberate, state-sponsored act of psychological destruction. The parallels to the Majestic 12 documents are impossible to ignore. The Bennewitz disinformation featured secret government groups managing the alien phenomenon, the recovery of alien bodies, and the reverse engineering of otherworldly technology. These are the exact same core themes found in the MJ12 papers. The methods were identical too. Both involved the creation of believable, yet ultimately false, official-looking documents designed to lead researchers down a specific, controlled path. The package sent to Jaime Shandera was postmarked from Albuquerque, the very city where Richard Doty was stationed and where the campaign against Bennewitz was run. This suggests a deeply unsettling possibility. The Majestic 12 documents may not have been a leak at all, but the next phase of a sophisticated operation. If a FOSI was willing to fabricate an entire alien war to neutralize one man, what would stop them from creating an entire foundational myth to misdirect the entire world? The Bennewitz affair proves they had the motive, the means, and the cold willingness to do exactly that. This leads us to a third, far more intricate possibility. What if the Majestic 12 papers are neither a complete lie nor the full truth, but something in between? This is the theory of the limited hangout, a term borrowed from the world of espionage. A limited hangout is a controlled leak. An intelligence agency facing pressure and unwanted scrutiny deliberately releases a package of information. The genius of the move is in its composition. The leak is not all false. Instead, it is a carefully blended mixture, a cocktail containing a small shot of genuine truth diluted with a large volume of clever falsehoods. The goal is not to reveal but to contain. By offering a compelling yet flawed narrative, the agency can achieve several objectives at once. It can satisfy the public's hunger for answers, but only with the answers it wants them to have. It can discredit serious investigators by associating their work with provably fake details. And most importantly, it can protect the real, unvarnished secret by creating a convincing decoy story that sends everyone down the wrong path. In this scenario, the kernel of truth within the Majestic 12 documents could be the central premise itself. Yes, a secret government panel was formed to investigate unidentified flying objects. Yes, there was a recovery of something unexplained. These are the potent, truthful hooks that give the documents their undeniable power. But then, the theory goes, the specific details were meticulously altered. The names of the 12 members might be incorrect, a blend of real officials and plausible additions. The date of the Eisenhower briefing could be wrong. The precise nature of the Roswell recovery might be distorted. These are the false ingredients mixed in to poison the well. Imagine a security system that does not just have one lock but two. The first lock is secrecy. When that begins to fail, the second lock is a flood of misleading information. The limited hangout is that second lock. It is a defensive maneuver, a way of saying, you want the truth. Here is a version of it, a version we have prepared for you. A version that will keep you busy for decades arguing over typewriter fonts and presidential signatures while the real files remain undisturbed. So we must confront a deeply unsettling question. Did someone, perhaps in an office at the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, assemble these documents not to enlighten us but to pacify us? Were we given a story just believable enough to stop us from looking for the one we were never meant to find? The Majestic 12 papers did more than just spark a debate among researchers. They escaped the confines of dusty archives and exploded into the heart of popular culture, providing a ready-made blueprint for a new kind of American myth. Suddenly, the idea of a clandestine committee of scientists and generals, a shadow government within the government, had a name and a roster. This was not a vague notion of a cover-up anymore. It was a specific, detailed story with characters, a mission, and a chilling sense of authority. Authors were among the first to seize this powerful new narrative. Whitley Strieber's monumental bestseller, Communion, while a personal account, rode this cultural wave, making the experience of the unknown feel immediate and real. But it was in fiction that the MJ-12 template truly found its legs. The concept of a secret group managing the alien presence became a central plot device in a wave of successful novels, giving readers a thrilling and terrifying framework for the unknown. The single most influential translation of this mythos, however, came to life on television screens every week. The X-Files did not just reference the idea of a secret council. It was built upon it. The show's iconic syndicate, with its cigarette-smoking man and its group of powerful, anonymous men pulling the strings from the shadows, was Majestic 12 dramatized for a prime-time audience. They were the ones managing the alien colonization, trading technology for secrets, and operating with a cold, bureaucratic indifference that felt terrifyingly plausible. The show's famous tagline, "The truth is out there," was a direct product of the world the MJ-12 papers had helped create. It was a promise that a hidden reality existed and that a structured, malevolent power was actively working to keep it from you. This was a quantum leap from the fuzzy photos and lone witnesses of earlier UFO lore. The mythology now had architects, a purpose, and a dark, compelling structure. This cultural absorption did something remarkable. It transformed the entire topic from a fringe speculation into a coherent, structured narrative that millions could understand and engage with. The idea was no longer just about lights in the sky. It was about secret meetings in polished boardrooms, about classified briefings, and about the very people we entrusted with our safety, hiding the most important discovery in human history. The documents provided the skeleton, and popular culture gave it flesh, blood, and a chillingly familiar face. Once this detailed conspiracy entered the bloodstream of our movies, our books, and our television shows, it became more than a theory. It became a modern folklore, a story we all recognized, making the question of its authenticity almost secondary to the power it now held over our collective imagination. The debate over these papers has hardened into two opposing realities, each with its own evidence and its own unshakable faith. On one side stand the believers who argue that the sheer plausibility of the story outweighs its flaws. They point first to the roster of Majestic 12 members. These were not random names pulled from a hat. They were the precise architects of post-war American science and military power, the exact individuals you would summon to handle an unprecedented technological and biological crisis. The idea that a forger in the 1980s could have so perfectly assembled this list, matching each man's expertise to the task at hand, strikes them as unlikely in the extreme. Furthermore, they ask what was the motive for such an elaborate hoax. The initial release brought no fame or fortune to its recipients, only decades of controversy and suspicion. The documents appeared at a time when the modern UFO research movement was just gaining momentum, and believers see them as a courageous leak, a piece of the puzzle that fits perfectly with thousands of other unexplained sightings and incidents. For them, the absence of a clear, profit-driven motive for the forgery makes the truth of the leak all the more compelling. The skeptics, however, stand firmly on the bedrock of empirical evidence. They counter that the story, no matter how compelling, is shattered by the physical facts. The typewriter font is their silver bullet. A document from 1952 simply cannot be typed with a proportional spacing font from a machine that did not exist until 1961. This is not a matter of interpretation. It is a chronological impossibility, as clear as a date stamp on a photograph. They add to this the forensic analysis of President Truman's signature, which shows subtle but telling signs of imitation rather than the fluid, unconscious hand of the man himself. Then there is the direct connection to known disinformation campaigns. The proven actions of Air Force Special Agent Richard Doty, who destroyed a man's life with fabricated alien narratives, provides a clear blueprint for how and why such a hoax would be perpetrated. The skeptics argue that the Majestic 12 papers are merely the most successful iteration of a tried and true method, a weapon of information control designed to mislead and discredit. For them, the motive is crystal clear. It is the age-old motive of power, the desire to hide the truth by burying it under a mountain of clever lies. So the battle lines are drawn not over a single document, but over our fundamental approach to truth itself. It is a conflict between faith in a hidden history, a gut feeling that the official story is a carefully constructed facade, and a trust in the empirical evidence right in front of our eyes, the ink, the paper, and the type that form the words. One side sees a conspiracy to conceal the cosmos. The other sees a conspiracy to deceive the public. Both cannot be true, and in the silent space between these two opposing certainties, the mystery of Majestic 12 continues to live and breathe and haunt our imagination. The shadow cast by Majestic 12 is long, stretching all the way into our present day. The same patterns of official secrecy and public fascination have re-emerged, only now they wear a modern uniform. In 2017, a bombshell report in the New York Times revealed the existence of a secret Pentagon program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. This was not a leaked film from an anonymous source. This was a confirmed, congressionally funded investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena run by the United States Department of Defense. The government was officially admitting it had been studying what we used to call flying saucers. Alongside this revelation came the declassification of 3 now famous Navy videos, known as FLIR, Gimbal, and GOFAST. These were not grainy, distant lights. They were crisp infrared captures from the most advanced fighter jets on the planet, showing objects performing maneuvers that defied our understanding of physics. The public reaction was a strange echo of the past. There was that same initial shock, the same feeling that the world had just shifted on its axis. but it was quickly followed by a familiar, weary skepticism. We had been here before. The government's handling of the information felt like a replay of an old script. Official spokespersons confirmed the videos were real, but then offered cautious, often unsatisfying explanations. They used new, less loaded terminology, replacing UFO with UAP or unidentified aerial phenomena. The message was simultaneously one of disclosure and containment. Yes, these things are in our skies. No, we do not know what they are. But the question that hangs in the air, the ghost of Majestic 12, is this: are we witnessing genuine, cautious transparency? Or is this a new, more sophisticated form of the same old game? The parallels are uncanny. Just as the MJ-12 documents spoke of recovered technology and biological entities, modern whistleblowers from within OTIP have begun to testify before Congress about the recovery of exotic materials and craft of unknown origin. The government's response mirrors the past, a blend of hesitant admission and steadfast denial of the most extraordinary claims. This creates the same frustrating hall of mirrors. Is the current disclosure movement the long-awaited unraveling of the truth, the culmination of decades of pressure? Or is it, like the limited hangout theory suggests, a controlled release of information designed to manage our expectations and bury the real secret even deeper? The legacy of Majestic 12 is that we can no longer look at government pronouncements on this topic with innocent eyes. We are now conditioned to look for the second story, the hidden motive behind the official statement. When a Navy pilot describes an object that violates known physics, we do not just hear a pilot's report. We hear an echo from a document mailed in 1984, and we are left to wonder if we are finally hearing the truth, or if we are simply listening to the latest chapter in a very old and very clever lie. Decades after their arrival, the Majestic 12 papers faced a new kind of jury, one composed of algorithms and raw processing power. The digital age brought forensic tools to the mystery that the original investigators could never have dreamed of, shifting the analysis from handwriting and typewriters to the very fabric of the language itself. Researchers began using sophisticated software to conduct stylometric analysis, a process that statistically deconstructs writing style. These programs compared the Majestic documents against a vast digital library of verified government memos from the 1940s and 50s, searching for patterns invisible to the human eye. They analyzed sentence length, word frequency, and the use of common prepositions and articles. The initial findings were subtle but pointed. The linguistic fingerprint of the MJ-12 papers showed slight statistical deviations from the authentic documents of its claimed era. It was as if the ghost of a later author was whispering between the lines, their unconscious modern phrasing subtly altering the statistical profile. The software also compared the documents to the known writings of suspected hoaxers, looking for a match in stylistic tics or vocabulary preferences. While no single piece of evidence was a smoking gun, the cumulative digital analysis added weight to the argument that the documents were a later creation, a carefully crafted imitation that could fool a person but not a machine trained on thousands of genuine samples. This digital scrutiny did not happen in a vacuum. It was fueled by the relentless energy of online communities where the case of Majestic 12 found a second life. Forums and social media platforms became global investigation boards where amateur sleuths and retired experts could crowdsource the mystery. A single user might notice a tiny inconsistency in a date format, while another would cross-reference a name from the MJ-12 roster with obscure military records from the 1950s. This collective brain, working across continents, has kept the investigation alive and dynamic, uncovering potential clues and debating new theories with a passion that has not dimmed. The documents are no longer locked in a filing cabinet. They are living data, endlessly examined and re-examined by a worldwide audience. So where does this leave us? The digital scalpel has revealed new layers of complexity, suggesting forgery while failing to definitively name the forger. The mystery persists not because the evidence is silent, but because we are still learning how to listen to what it has to say. Yet for all the words typed on those pages, one thing remains conspicuously absent. The entire Majestic 12 narrative hinges on a physical event, the recovery of a craft and its occupants, yet not a single piece of that physical reality has ever surfaced for public scrutiny. We have detailed written accounts describing exotic wreckage and non-human bodies, but no metal fragments, no strange fibers, no biological samples. This void is the story's greatest vulnerability, the gaping hole through which skepticism floods in. Imagine a detailed police report describing a stolen masterpiece, a painting meticulously documented down to the brushstrokes and the frame's carving. But the painting itself is nowhere to be found. Without that physical object, the report is just a story, its claims impossible to verify. This is the precise dilemma facing the MJ-12 papers. They describe the ultimate crime scene, a cosmic event that would redefine humanity's place in the universe, but they provide no evidence from that scene. For historians and scientists, this absence is not just a minor detail, it is a fatal flaw. Their disciplines are built on a foundation of tangible proof, on artifacts and data that can be tested, measured, and peer-reviewed. A document alone, especially one of such contested origin, cannot carry the weight of such an extraordinary claim. They ask a simple, devastating question. If this secret group managed the most profound secret in history for decades, overseeing the reverse engineering of otherworldly technology and the study of alien biology, how is it that not one sliver of evidence, not one leaked photograph or material sample has ever escaped? The sheer scale of such an operation would involve thousands of people, from scientists and engineers to janitors and security personnel. In every other massive government project, from the Manhattan Project to the Apollo program, secrets leaked. Blueprints were copied, samples were pocketed, stories were told. The idea that a secret of this magnitude and physicality remained hermetically sealed for over half a century strains credibility to its breaking point. This lack of a smoking gun, a piece of the saucer, or a thread from a flight suit is why the mainstream academic and scientific world largely views the Majestic 12 story as an elaborate fabrication. They see a compelling narrative built entirely on paper, a castle constructed in the air with no foundation in the physical world. So we are left with two possibilities, both profound in their implications. Either the keepers of this secret executed the most perfect information blackout in human history, a feat of secrecy that defies all historical precedent, or the documents are a story, a powerful and alluring myth that was never meant to be backed by anything more than words on a page. Perhaps the most chilling way to view the Majestic 12 papers is not as a secret revealed, but as a weapon deployed. This is the perspective of psychological operations, or PSYOP, a discipline where information itself is the battlefield. A sophisticated PSYOP does not simply tell a lie. It constructs an entire reality, a narrative so compelling and internally consistent that it becomes accepted as truth, thereby achieving a strategic goal without a single shot being fired. The MJ-12 documents fit this model with disturbing precision. Imagine the objective. By the early 1980s, public interest in UFOs was surging, fueled by new books and a growing community of dedicated researchers. This unwanted scrutiny posed a genuine threat. If the government was testing radical new aircraft in secret, the last thing it needed was a public obsessed with every strange light in the sky. How do you solve this problem? You do not just deny, you overwhelm. You introduce a story so grand and detailed that it consumes the entire conversation. You create Majestic 12. A masterful PSYOP would carefully craft these documents to be just believable enough. You populate the committee with real, powerful men whose careers make them perfect candidates. You anchor the story to a real, unresolved event like Roswell to give it historical weight. You even seed the documents with subtle flaws, the anachronistic typewriter font, the slightly off signatures, ensuring that when skeptics eventually find them, the entire narrative can be publicly dismantled. This is the genius of the long game. The initial leak captivates the true believers, redirecting their energy into a decade-long wild goose chase. Then, when the flaws are exposed, the entire field of UFO research is discredited by association. It becomes a joke, the territory of people who cannot tell a real document from a fake. The strategic goal is achieved not by silencing the conversation, but by making the conversation itself seem ridiculous. Another potential goal could have been to gauge public reaction. Releasing a controlled narrative about alien bodies and recovered technology would be a perfect way to measure the societal panic, the religious fallout, and the political impact of such a revelation, all without ever confirming a thing. The documents act as a social thermometer, testing the temperature of the world before any real decision is made. From this vantage point, the Majestic 12 papers are not a failed leak. They are a triumphant success of information warfare. They created a myth so powerful it shaped our culture for decades, all while perfectly protecting the real secrets, whatever they may be, behind a fortress of compelling fiction. Ultimately, the truth of the ink and paper is almost irrelevant now. The Majestic 12 documents have achieved something far greater than simply proving or disproving a conspiracy. They have become a permanent landmark in our cultural landscape, a powerful symbol of a broken contract between the public and the powers that govern them. Whether they were a hoax or a leak, their real legacy is the deep and enduring distrust they both exposed and amplified. Think about the world they emerged into. This was the era of Watergate and the Pentagon Papers, a time when the public was first waking up to the fact that their leaders were capable of elaborate, systemic deception. The MJ-12 papers fit perfectly into this new, unsettling reality. They told people that the lies were not just about political espionage or a botched burglary, but about the very nature of our reality and our place in the cosmos. The decades-long debate over their authenticity, with its focus on typewriter fonts and bureaucratic language, misses the larger point. The documents resonated because they gave form to a suspicion that was already there, a collective intuition that we are not being told the whole story. The sheer energy poured into debunking them is a testament to their power. You do not spend 40 years arguing over a meaningless piece of paper. The fact that we are still talking about them proves that they tapped into a profound and unresolved public anxiety. This is the real secret the papers revealed, not about aliens, but about us. They showed a deep-seated, almost universal desire for transparency, and a widespread belief that our institutions are capable of hiding world-altering truth. The enduring mystery of Majestic 12 is not really about what happened in Roswell in 1947. It is about why we are so ready to believe that someone in a position of authority is lying to us. That is a truth far more uncomfortable and far more revealing than any story about a recovered flying disc. Decades of debate have failed to resolve the central, haunting questions. Who possessed the necessary combination of deep historical knowledge, access to obscure government details, and the technical skill to produce such a convincing forgery? The list of Majestic 12 members was not just a collection of famous names. It was a perfectly curated group of specialists whose real-world expertise aligned precisely with the document's claims. To fake that requires more than a casual interest. It demands the research skills of a professional historian. Then there is the physical production. Acquiring the correct period paper, matching the style of official memoranda, and navigating the perilous task of forging a presidential signature all point to an operation of considerable sophistication. Was this the work of a lone genius with too much time on their hands, or did it require the resources of an organization? If it was a private hoax, the silence of the perpetrators is deafening. Creating the 20th century's most famous UFO documents would be a monumental achievement, a secret difficult to keep forever. Yet no one has ever credibly stepped forward to boast, to explain their methods, or to claim the strange fame that would surely follow. This enduring silence itself feels suspicious, as if those responsible are bound by something more powerful than a mere promise, perhaps by a non-disclosure agreement or the fear of greater consequences. If we accept the disinformation theory, the questions only become more profound. What was the true objective? Was the target always the public, aiming to muddy the waters and make the entire topic a joke? Or was the audience more specific, meant to mislead foreign intelligence agencies who are also monitoring the UFO phenomenon, sending them chasing a brilliantly fabricated lead? The campaign against Paul Bennewitz proves the government's willingness to use psychological warfare on a single citizen. Could Majestic 12 simply be that same tactic scaled up to encompass the entire world? And then there are the human tragedies that shadow the story, the strange coincidences that refuse to be dismissed. The death of James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense named in the memo, continues to fuel speculation. His mental collapse and fatal fall from a hospital window remain a dark enigma. Was it a suicide driven by the immense pressures of his office, or does the official story conceal a more sinister truth connected to the secrets he may have held? These unresolved personal dramas weave a thread of tangible human cost through the abstract debate over fonts and signatures. They remind us that behind the typed words on these controversial pages lie real lives, real power, and real mysteries that, decades later, have stubbornly refused to die. So we find ourselves at the end of a labyrinth, a journey that began with a single, unmarked envelope and spiraled into one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. We have followed the trail from that first shocking film, through the roster of America's most powerful men, to the forensic evidence that points so clearly to forgery. We have seen the chilling parallels to known disinformation campaigns and wrestled with the possibility that the entire story was a weapon of psychological warfare. The evidence against the documents is formidable, a mountain of typographical anachronisms and linguistic inconsistencies, yet their power to captivate remains utterly undiminished. This is the true secret of Majestic 12. It is not a story about alien bodies or recovered saucers. It is a story about us. It is a profound exploration of our deep need to believe there is more to the world than we are told, our suspicion of the institutions that govern us, and our endless fascination with the idea of a hidden reality. The documents hold up a mirror, and what they reflect is the human heart with all its capacity for wonder, for deception, and for an insatiable hunger to know what lies in the shadows. So now the question passes to you. What do you believe? Are the MJ-12 documents a smoking gun for the biggest cover-up in human history, or are they the most elaborate hoax ever perpetrated? The evidence is laid out before you. The decision is yours. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.